The cabin of the fighter jet vibrated with a low, mechanical hum, like the heartbeat of a beast barely restrained. Alex tightened his gloves over the controls, fingers pressing against the worn leather grips as if sheer force could keep the aircraft steady. He had flown hundreds of missions, drills, and training flights before, but this one felt different. Every nerve in his body buzzed with a mixture of anticipation and dread. Outside, the early morning sky stretched endlessly, a canvas of gray clouds and pale blue streaked with the first hints of dawn. The sun hadn't fully risen, and shadows hung low over the tarmac, blending into the distant tree line. The jet's engines roared to life beneath him, shaking the cockpit with raw power. Alex's stomach flipped. Takeoff was always a moment of vulnerability, a brief surrender to gravity and machine, but today, that anxiety was magnified tenfold. He had been assigned this flight last minute, the kind of call that made a pilot's pulse spike. The mission details were vague, almost deliberately so, buried under layers of standard military jargon. Routine training, the briefing had said. Maintain silence, observe, respond only if necessary. Routine. Alex forced a smile as he repeated the words in his mind. Routine meant nothing when the unknown waited beyond the clouds. As the jet taxied toward the runway, the ground crew waved frantically, but Alex barely noticed. His focus narrowed to the gauges, the instruments, and the outside world. Every blink of the light panels, every flicker on the radar demanded his attention. He adjusted the throttle, feeling the immense vibration through his seat. The runway stretched ahead like a metallic ribbon cutting through the earth, disappearing into fog. And then he lifted off. The initial surge of speed pressed him back against his seat, and the horizon fell away beneath him. The trees, the runway, the small service buildings, they shrank and blurred, leaving only clouds and sky. Up here alone, the silence of the cockpit was absolute, broken only by the roar of engines and the occasional crackle of instruments. Alex's heartbeat seemed impossibly loud in his ears. He had stayed silent all flight just as ordered. No check-ins, no chatter, no casual radio banter that could betray his location or intentions. It was a discipline he had mastered over years of training, a skill honed to perfection. Yet the quiet now felt oppressive, almost unnatural. Something was out there, something his instincts refused to ignore. Radar flickered with the usual traffic, distant commercial flights, routine military patrols, nothing of concern. But then a blip appeared, small and fleeting, moving too fast to be an ordinary aircraft. Alex froze, tracking the dot as it shifted erratically across the screen. It wasn't following a standard flight path. It was deliberate, precise, almost intelligent. He exhaled slowly, forcing his muscles to relax. Maybe it was just a glitch, a misreading, but instinct gnawed at him, a quiet, insistent alarm he couldn't dismiss. He adjusted his altitude, turning slightly to scan the horizon visually, eyes straining against the dim light. Nothing. Only clouds and sky stretched as far as he could see. And then, just as he was about to question his own perception, a voice crackled through the radio. "Phantom, do you read?" Alex froze. The word sliced through the cabin like a blade. Phantom. His call sign. How did they know? No one on this flight should have had it. No one should have even been listening. His knuckles whitened as he gripped the controls tighter, trying to steady the rising panic. "Who is this?" he whispered, almost to himself, though he knew the radio would carry every syllable. No response came, only the faint static of the open frequencies. His heart hammered in his chest, each beat a reminder of the isolation surrounding him. The F-16s assigned to this mission, a pair of sleek silver Predators, flanked him on either side. Their movements were precise, almost uncanny, mirroring his adjustments with eerie synchronicity. Alex's stomach twisted. Was it possible they knew more than they were letting on? The wind whipped past the canopy as he climbed higher, clouds parting like a curtain to reveal the endless blue above. Sunlight glinted off the jet's fuselage, momentarily blinding him, and in that glare he thought he saw shapes, shadows moving against the clouds, fleeting and impossible to define. He swallowed, trying to suppress the rising panic. Routine flight, he reminded himself. The mantra felt hollow, meaningless. There was nothing routine about this. He felt eyes on him, though he knew it was impossible. Nothing alive could match the speed, the precision of the F-16s. And yet, the sensation refused to leave. Another crackle in the radio pulled him from the spiral of his thoughts. Phantom, maintain formation. We've got eyes on the target. Target? The word was clinical, detached, but it sent a shiver down his spine. There was no target scheduled for this flight, nothing in the mission brief. His pulse spiked, adrenaline surging through his veins. He glanced at the F-16s again. They didn't speak much, but the lead pilot's movements were deliberate, aggressive, like a hunter closing in. Alex adjusted his throttle, keeping pace with the formations, heart in his throat. He had trained for combat, for aerial maneuvers, for the unthinkable. But nothing in his career had prepared him for this. Flying blind into the unknown, flanked by allies who might be more mysterious than the threat itself. A sudden blip appeared on the radar again, closer this time, moving with impossible speed. Alex's stomach lurched. He blinked, double-checked the instruments. The blip wasn't behaving like an aircraft, a drone, or any object he had ever seen. It moved in patterns that made no sense, acceleration beyond any human-made machine. He exhaled sharply, trying to steady his trembling hands. He wanted to radio back, to ask questions, to confirm reality, but he remembered the command: silent flight. He swallowed the words, held his tongue, and forced his focus to the instruments and the horizon. Then another crackle of static, this time a whisper, almost inaudible. "Phantom, do you copy?" Alex froze mid-breath, eyes scanning the cockpit as if the sound itself might explain the impossible. How did anyone know his call sign? Why were they calling him out now? And most importantly, what was the target that only they could see? A bead of sweat slid down his temple, tracing a path through the dirt smudges on his flight helmet. He pressed the controls forward, increasing altitude, trying to gain perspective. The F-16s mirrored him flawlessly, silent shadows keeping pace like phantoms themselves. Every instinct screamed to break formation, to retreat, to escape. But he stayed. The unknown waited, and he was trapped in the cockpit, alone yet surrounded. The clouds thickened ahead, dark and foreboding, curling into strange shapes. Alex's breath quickened as he climbed higher, the sun behind him now a fiery glare that made the shadows flicker and twist. Something moved in that light, a shape he couldn't define, yet impossible to ignore. And then silence. The hum of engines, the faint static of the radio, the mechanical vibrations, everything seemed to hold its breath. "Phantom, we see you." The words cut through him like ice. They were calm, almost casual, but their weight crushed him. "We see you." Alex's hands tightened on the controls. His pulse was a drumbeat of panic and adrenaline. Who was up there with him? How could they see him? And what did it mean that his call sign, his identity, was already known to them? The sky stretched endlessly, serene yet threatening, a battlefield waiting to reveal itself. Alex swallowed hard, forcing his jaw to unclench, his eyes scanning the horizon. Somewhere beyond the clouds, something waited, and whatever it was, it knew him. The jet shuddered as turbulence rattled the cockpit, a reminder that he was still very much alive, but only just. The unknown closed in, patient, silent, relentless. Alex's grip on the controls tightened as he prepared for what he couldn't yet see, his mind spinning with questions he dared not speak aloud. Because the truth was terrifying. Out here, alone in the sky, silence could be survival, and it could also be his undoing. Alex's pulse hadn't slowed. The calm, almost intimate voice that had called his call sign lingered in the cockpit, twisting his thoughts into knots. "Phantom, do you copy?" The words had a weight, like a tether connecting him to something unseen yet omnipresent. His fingers gripped the controls tighter, knuckles white, as he struggled to steady his breath. The horizon stretched endlessly, the sky deceptively peaceful, hiding the storm that churned in his gut. He glanced at the F-16s flanking him. They glided with an unnatural precision, almost as if they were extensions of his own instincts rather than independent machines with pilots inside. Their sleek bodies reflected the pale sun, a blur of silver and steel against the morning sky. Every movement mirrored his own, a perfect ballet of aerodynamics and skill. Yet the synchronization unsettled him. It was too perfect. Alex swallowed hard and forced himself to scan the clouds for any anomalies. He had trained for this. Millions of scenarios had run through simulations, drills, and training flights, but nothing had prepared him for the sensation that eyes were on him, unseen and waiting. A bead of sweat slid down his temple beneath the helmet. It wasn't just fear. It was the sharp, primal awareness that someone, or something, was calculating his every move, anticipating him. The radio crackled again, faint but deliberate. "Phantom, maintain your current heading. Eyes on the target, do not deviate." "Target?" Alex muttered under his breath, almost lost in disbelief. There was no target scheduled for this flight, nothing in the briefing. And yet the command carried authority and a subtle menace. He glanced at the radar screen. The previous blip had vanished, disappeared as if swallowed by the sky itself. But the F-16 stayed perfectly aligned, guiding him without a word beyond the brief radio commands. Alex exhaled slowly, trying to suppress the knot of panic rising in his stomach. Maybe it was a drill, a high-level test he hadn't known about, but no test ever felt like this. This felt alive, aware, like a predator circling the unseen prey. Suddenly, a flicker on the radar drew his attention. Another blip appeared, closer this time, moving faster than any conventional aircraft. It shifted erratically, making sharp turns that defied logic, acceleration beyond what any human-made machine could achieve. His stomach dropped. He adjusted his controls, climbing higher to get a better visual, scanning the clouds that swirled with eerie patterns, almost like smoke curling against sunlight. For a fleeting moment, he thought he saw it. A shadow, sleek and metallic, flickering in and out of the clouds like a ghost. Alex's fingers trembled slightly as he steadied the jet. He had to stay calm. Training screamed at him to maintain formation, trust the F-16s and not act impulsively. But every instinct screamed, get out. The silence he had held so meticulously in the cockpit was now suffocating. He wanted to radio, to speak, to scream even, but he knew any sound could expose him. The lead F-16 surged slightly, moving ahead in a subtle but unmistakable maneuver. Alex followed, his heart pounding like a drum. The other F-16 adjusted its angle as well, forming a triangle around him. He had the strange and unsettling sensation that they weren't protecting him, they were hurting him. The radio crackled again, almost a whisper now, deliberate and measured. "Phantom, do you see it?" Alex froze mid-breath. See what? The shadow, the anomaly, or the unspoken danger? His throat tightened and he forced himself to scan the clouds, every movement meticulous, every blink calculated. Nothing was visible, yet he felt it. A presence fast, deliberate, watching, waiting. The sky around him began to change subtly. Clouds thickened unnaturally, swirling in patterns that made him question physics itself. Sunlight fractured through the mist in sharp, jagged beams, illuminating fleeting metallic flashes in the distance. He squinted, trying to catch the movement, but the shadows shifted faster than his eyes could follow. The F-16s mirrored every adjustment he made. The lead pilot's movements were exact, almost robotic, precise to the point of eerie perfection. Alex had flown with elite pilots before, but this was beyond human capability. And the voice, calm, measured, unshakable, echoed in the cockpit, threading tension through every muscle in his body. "Phantom, stay with us. Do not break formation." He gritted his teeth. Every instinct screamed to flee, to break the rules, to escape the invisible threat. But something primal held him in place. The F-16s weren't just accompanying him, they were part of a system, a network that seemed aware of the danger long before he was. The words repeated in his mind, "Do not break formation," not just an order, a warning. Another flicker on the radar drew his eyes. This one was closer, moving almost directly beneath him. His stomach churned. It moved with purpose, precision, and terrifying speed. He adjusted his altitude to get a better angle, but the object seemed to anticipate him, shifting almost instantaneously. Alex's breath came in shallow bursts. The quiet in the cockpit was now unbearable, the hum of engines a constant reminder of isolation. He wanted to speak, to ask questions, but the weight of the silence was paralyzing. One wrong move, one word, could provoke something catastrophic. And then suddenly, the shadow moved into view. It was unlike anything Alex had seen. Sleek, metallic, aerodynamic, but unlike any aircraft or drone he knew. It reflected sunlight in flashes that burned his vision, and yet it moved with a grace and intelligence that made him question reality itself. His heart slammed against his ribs as adrenaline coursed through his veins. The lead F-16 surged slightly forward, cutting through the air with precision, and the voice came again, calm, unflinching. "Phantom, it's not friendly." Alex's stomach dropped. Not friendly. The words were clinical, devoid of emotion, but their impact was visceral. His hands tightened on the controls, muscles coiled, eyes locked on the metallic shadow that now dominated his focus. This was no drill. This was no mistake. Something alive, or something smarter than any human, was in the sky, and it had noticed him. He swallowed hard, struggling to control the rising panic. The F-16s formed a tighter perimeter, flanking him with surgical precision, creating a barrier between him and the unknown entity. Every second stretched, each breath measured, each heartbeat loud and deafening. Another crackle of radio, this time urgent but still calm. "Phantom, hold steady or we lose you." Alex's mind raced. Hold steady? Against what? His chest tightened as he realized the reality. The unknown was faster, smarter, and more aware than he could comprehend. Any misstep could be fatal. He forced himself to focus, eyes scanning the skies, heart hammering, every sense alive. The metallic shadow dipped below the clouds and then surged upward again, moving with impossible speed. Alex adjusted his flight path instinctively, trying to keep it in view. The F-16s mirrored him, maintaining a protective, but not defensive, formation. The radio fell silent for a brief moment, only static. Then a whisper, almost intimate. "Phantom, do you feel it?" Alex swallowed, chills racing down his spine. Feel it. He could feel the tension, the intelligence in the air, the anticipation of the unseen entity. His grip on the controls tightened further. The jet trembled slightly, turbulence perhaps, or was it the shadow itself disturbing the air? He exhaled slowly, forcing calm over panic. One thing was certain, he was not alone, and whatever was up there, it knew him. The sky seemed to stretch forever, a vast expanse of blue and clouds, deceptive in its serenity. Yet every instinct screamed that danger was near, watching, calculating. Alex's pulse raced, muscles tensed, mind hyperaware. The F-16s maintained their silent vigil, guiding him through the unknown. He realized with a sinking feeling that this was only the beginning. The calm, calculated voices, the precision of the F-16s, the unidentifiable shadow, all signs of something far beyond training exercises or routine flights. This was real, and it was waiting. Cliffhanger ending for Part 2. Alex adjusted his heading, eyes straining against the sunlight glare. A sudden flicker below the clouds revealed a metallic shape darting impossibly fast, turning sharply toward him. The voice came again over the radio, calm yet bone-chilling. "Phantom, you've been marked." Alex's stomach lurched. Marked. He gritted his teeth, realizing he had no idea who or what was watching him or why he had been singled out. The sky around him seemed to darken and the shadow moved closer, faster than he thought possible, cutting through the clouds like a knife. The shadow wasn't just approaching, it was hunting. Alex's eyes burned as he scanned the horizon, searching for any sign of its shape, any glint of metal, any movement in the clouds that could hint at its trajectory. The F-16s maintained their positions, precise, and almost sentient in their maneuvers, flanking him with a silent authority that only heightened the tension. It was a calculated choreography, one that made Alex feel both protected and trapped at the same time. The radar had gone haywire. The blip appeared and disappeared like a ghost, moving faster than any aircraft he'd ever encountered. The lead F-16's movements mirrored the anomaly as if it anticipated every dart and surge, every impossible angle. Alex's pulse raced. Every instinct screamed to break formation, to turn away, to flee. But he couldn't. The voice on the radio echoed again. "Phantom, stay with us. Do not deviate." Alex swallowed hard. There was authority in that calm tone, a confidence he didn't share, and a warning he couldn't ignore. If he broke formation, if he moved too hastily, he realized he might not survive to regret it. A sudden flash of light caught his eye, a reflection glinting off something sleek in the distance. He squinted, eyes narrowing against the sun, and caught a glimpse of the shape, metallic, aerodynamic, and impossibly fast. His stomach lurched. It was no conventional aircraft, no drone, no human-made craft he had ever trained against. It moved with intelligence, precision, and awareness, a predator in the sky that knew exactly how to stalk. Alex's breath hitched. This isn't real, it can't be real. The lead F-16 surged forward without warning, breaking the silence like a hammer against steel. Its movement was a challenge, a signal, and Alex instinctively followed, pushing the jet to its limits. His heart pounded, adrenaline coursing through every vein. He had trained for extreme maneuvers, high-G turns, and combat situations, but nothing prepared him for this. Fleeing from an unknown, intelligent force that seemed to anticipate his every move. The shadow dipped low, disappearing behind a dense bank of clouds, only to surge upward again with breathtaking speed. It was everywhere and nowhere at once, a ghost that defied the laws of physics. Alex felt a cold sweat on his forehead. His fingers clutched the controls so tightly that his knuckles whitened. Every muscle in his body was taut, ready for sudden action, yet paralyzed by the incomprehensible nature of what he was witnessing. The radio crackled again, faint but clear. "Phantom, it's circling. Keep your eyes on it." Alex's stomach dropped. Circling. He forced himself to maintain his formation with the F-16s, scanning the clouds, adjusting altitude, speed, and angle. Each movement felt like a calculated gamble. He had no way of knowing if the shadow would strike now, later, or if it even could be struck. Suddenly it appeared again, directly above him this time, moving with an impossible velocity. The sun glinted off its surface, revealing edges and angles that seemed almost alien. Alex's breath caught in his throat. It wasn't just fast. It wasn't just intelligent. It was aware of him, watching him, reacting to him. The lead pilot's voice cut through the radio again, calm but laden with tension. "Phantom, it's studying you. Move carefully." Alex's hands shook as he adjusted the throttle, climbing higher, banking slightly to the left. He felt the jet respond beneath him, the vibrations through the fuselage like the heartbeat of a living creature. The shadow mirrored his movements almost immediately. It wasn't pursuing mindlessly. It was learning, adapting, predicting. A flash of panic struck him. This thing isn't just a threat, it's smarter than me. He forced his mind to focus. Training kicked in. Control, precision, observation. He kept his eyes locked on the radar, the sky, the F-16s, and the shadows simultaneously. The cockpit felt smaller with every passing second, tighter, heavier, like the air itself was pressing down on him. Another whisper came over the radio, closer now, almost intimate. "Phantom, you feel it, don't you?" Alex's jaw tightened. Feel what? His heart was hammering, his skin prickled. He could feel the presence of the shadow, the unnatural awareness of something intelligent in the sky, the tension in the F-16's every movement. It was watching him, testing him, circling him like a predator choosing its moment. The metallic silhouette flashed again, descending sharply toward the cloud line, disappearing from view in an instant. Alex adjusted his altitude to follow, peering through the canopy into the mist. He saw nothing, and yet he could feel it. The lead F-16 surged ahead, cutting through the clouds with breathtaking precision. The voice came again, calm, authoritative. "Phantom, do not engage. Observe." Alex's stomach twisted. Observe. He wanted to scream, to radio back, to ask what he was supposed to do in the face of this impossible entity. But he stayed silent, forcing control over his voice, over his fear, over the adrenaline surging through him. Observation, he realized, was now his only weapon. The shadow appeared again, higher this time, banking sharply toward the sun. The light glinted off its surface in a blinding flash, almost as if it were communicating, signaling, or warning. Alex's mind raced. How could this thing be so fast, so aware, so intelligent? A sudden motion in the clouds caught his eye. The shadow dipped sharply toward him, a streak of metallic silver cutting through the air. Alex's stomach lurched, and his hands clenched the controls. The F-16s mirrored his every adjustment, forming a protective barrier around him. "Phantom, brace yourself." The words were calm, almost clinical, yet they carried the weight of undeniable danger. Alex's pulse spiked as he realized that this wasn't a drill. There was no training, no simulation, no precedent for what he was witnessing. This was alive, this was real, and it was closing in. The shadow streaked past him in a blur, faster than the human eye could follow. The wind roared past the cockpit as Alex twisted and turned, following its impossible trajectory. The F-16 stayed close, flanking him, a protective wedge against the unknown. His chest burned from the strain, his arms ached from the tension, and yet he forced himself to maintain focus. A final whisper over the radio, calm but bone-chilling. "Phantom, it's studying you. Do not break formation." Alex's stomach dropped. He realized the horrifying truth. The shadow wasn't attacking yet. It wasn't fleeing. It was analyzing him, learning him, calculating his movements. And the F-16s weren't just escorting him. They were part of a system, a puzzle that he couldn't yet understand. His eyes flicked to the radar, then to the sky. The shadow had disappeared again, leaving only silence and clouds. But he could feel its presence, a heartbeat, a pressure, a tension in the very air around him. And then another signal. "Phantom, it knows your name." Alex's breath caught. He felt his stomach drop to his boots. How could it know him? Why him? The sky stretched endlessly, calm and blue, hiding an impossible danger that moved faster than he could comprehend. He gritted his teeth, forcing himself to focus, to survive, to observe. The F-16s flanked him like ghostly sentinels, silent but unwavering. The shadow was out there somewhere, calculating, learning, waiting. And Alex realized with a cold certainty that this was only the beginning. Cliffhanger ending for Part 3. The shadow flickered in the distance, a metallic blur that defied every law of flight he knew. And then, the lead F-16 broke radio silence with a voice calm but chilling. "Phantom, it's coming for us." Alex's stomach lurched. Coming for them or for him? He gritted his teeth, eyes wide, heart hammering, as the impossible silhouette surged through the clouds, faster than thought, faster than fear. Alex felt the jet vibrate beneath him, engines screaming as though they sensed the same predator he did. The shadow was no longer just an enigma. It was a force of intent, surging through the sky with terrifying precision. His pulse thundered in his ears, echoing the roar of the jet, each beat synchronized with the metallic blur that danced along the clouds like a ghost. The F-16s maintained their silent formation, moving in perfect sync around him, yet there was an urgency in their maneuvers, subtle but undeniable. The lead pilot's voice came through the radio, calm but laced with an edge Alex couldn't ignore. "Phantom, it's gaining on us. Keep tight." Alex's stomach twisted. Gaining on them. This was no ordinary aircraft, Nothing human-made could reach such speeds, make such sudden, sharp turns, or anticipate evasive maneuvers with such accuracy. And yet here it was, stalking him, observing him, calculating him in real time. He adjusted the throttle instinctively, climbing higher to gain better visibility, straining his eyes against the sun's glare. Clouds swirled ahead, thick and unpredictable, casting shifting shadows across the sky. The metallic silhouette flickered in and out of view, like a phantom in the sunlight, teasing, taunting, impossible to fully comprehend. Alex's hands shook slightly, gripping the controls tighter. His training kicked in, every muscle, every instinct screaming to survive. Yet fear gnawed at the edges of his consciousness, a sharp reminder that he was not just chasing an unknown craft, he was being hunted. Suddenly, the shadow dove through the clouds with impossible acceleration, streaking beneath him, then upward again in a blur. Alex's stomach lurched as he banked sharply to follow, wind rushing past the canopy with a deafening roar. The jet shuddered under the strain, but he forced himself to maintain focus, calculating angles, speed, and altitude with meticulous precision. "Phantom, keep your eyes on it. Do not break formation," the voice urged, calm but commanding. Alex swallowed hard. The instructions were simple, almost clinical, but the tension behind them pressed down like an invisible weight. Breaking formation wasn't an option, but neither was staying passive. Every maneuver he made seemed anticipated, every adjustment mirrored by the shadow. It was learning, adapting, reading him in ways that were impossible to predict. The chase intensified. Clouds blurred past in a dizzying swirl of gray and white, sunlight breaking through in jagged shafts. The shadows surged again, banking sharply, cutting across the horizon in a streak of silver brilliance. Alex's eyes widened. He could see the design now, aerodynamic, metallic, edges glinting unnaturally, almost alive. There was a strange elegance to its movements, a grace that made the impossible feel natural. His mind raced. How could anything move like this? It defied everything he knew about physics, aerodynamics, and flight. And yet here it was, chasing him with intent, calculating every angle, every evasive maneuver he attempted. The lead F-16 surged ahead, cutting through the air with razor precision, a silent guardian, or perhaps a sentinel guiding him through the storm. Alex followed instinctively, his eyes never leaving the blurring shadow ahead. He felt the pressure building, a tension coiling in his chest like a spring ready to snap. "Phantom, brace yourself," the radio crackled, calm yet urgent. Alex's stomach dropped. Brace himself. What was coming? His mind raced with possibilities, none of them comforting. He adjusted his course, following the lead F-16's subtle cues, each movement deliberate, measured, calculated to the second. The shadow responded instantly, banking, diving, surging, a predator in the clouds that seemed aware of every motion. The sky darkened slightly as storm clouds gathered ahead, swirling like a funnel. The shadow disappeared into the mist, only to reappear moments later with impossible speed, cutting across the sun in a flash that made Alex flinch. His pulse pounded, every nerve in his body alert. This was no longer just a chase, it was a test, a hunt, and the rules were unknown. A sharp flicker on the radar caught his attention. Another blip, closer than before, moving erratically but with purpose. Alex's stomach lurched. He had trained for evasive maneuvers, for combat simulations, for extreme conditions, but nothing prepared him for an intelligent force that didn't just react, it anticipated. He adjusted his flight path, climbing, banking, diving through the clouds in a desperate ballet of survival. The F-16s mirrored him flawlessly, creating a protective wedge around him, yet their presence was both reassuring and unnerving. It was as if they knew more than he did, guiding him toward an unknown objective he couldn't comprehend. "Phantom, do not engage. Observe," the voice instructed again. Observe, Alex's stomach twisted. There was no room for observation here. The shadow was closing in, faster, sharper, more intelligent than anything he had faced. Every instinct screamed to fight, to defend, to take action, but the orders were clear. Survive, stay silent, maintain formation. Suddenly, the shadow surged directly toward them, a silver streak cutting through the clouds with breathtaking speed. Alex's eyes widened, heart hammering. The F-16s responded instantly, veering to create a protective barrier, their engines screaming as they cut through the air. Alex felt a rush of wind as the shadow passed overhead, the turbulence rattling the cockpit violently. His stomach dropped, a wave of adrenaline flooding his system. He swallowed hard, forcing himself to focus, to stay calm, to observe. The metallic blur banked sharply, moving in patterns that defied logic. Alex's pulse raced. It wasn't just a chase, it was a confrontation, a test of reflexes, calculation, and nerve, and the shadow was winning. The radio crackled, quiet but deliberate. "Phantom, it knows your maneuvers. Adjust." Alex's stomach sank. "It knows me." The words echoed in his mind, a cold, undeniable truth. This wasn't random, this wasn't chance. Whatever it was, it had studied him, learned him, anticipated his reactions. He adjusted the controls, banking hard, climbing rapidly, then diving through a break in the clouds. The F-16s mirrored every movement, precise and unerring. The shadow responded immediately, cutting through the sky in a streak of silver brilliance, closing the distance with impossible speed. Alex's breath came in shallow bursts. Sweat ran down his temples, his palms ached from gripping the controls, his jaw ached from the tension. And yet he forced himself to maintain focus, scanning the clouds, the radar, the F-16s, the shadow, everything, simultaneously. The shadow surged once more, banking sharply toward the sun. A flash of light blinded him briefly, and he blinked, heart hammering. The F-16s flanked him, engines roaring in unison, creating a protective corridor. Alex realized with a sinking certainty, this wasn't just a pursuit. It was an engagement, a hunt, and survival depended on more than skill. It depended on instinct, courage, and timing. The radio fell silent for a moment, the calm before the storm. Alex's pulse thundered in his ears, every nerve on fire. He scanned the horizon, eyes flicking between clouds, sun, radar blips, and the empty sky. The shadow could be anywhere. And yet he felt it, its presence, its awareness, its intent. Then a whisper through the radio, calm but chilling. "Phantom, it's learning you. Prepare." Alex's stomach dropped. Learning him, calculating him, studying every move. And the realization hit him like a punch to the gut. Whatever this was, it had decided he was the target. The sky stretched endlessly, serene and blue, hiding an unimaginable danger. Alex's heart pounded, muscles coiled, mind racing as he prepared for the impossible. A confrontation with an intelligence faster, smarter, and more aware than anything he had ever faced. The shadow flickered again, a streak of silver in the distance, moving closer, faster, sharper than ever. Alex's jaw tightened. The F-16 surged with him, engines screaming, a protective wall, but it wouldn't be enough if the entity had calculated their limits. Cliffhanger ending for Part 4. The shadow surged toward them, banking sharply, closing the distance at impossible speed. The radio crackled one final time, calm but bone-chilling. "Phantom, you cannot outrun this. Brace yourself." Alex's stomach lurched. His eyes widened. The metallic blur was almost upon them, faster than thought, faster than fear, and whatever happened next would change everything. Alex's stomach churned as the shadow streaked closer, faster than any aircraft should be able to move. The roar of the F-16 engines filled his ears, a deafening, relentless symphony that could not drown out the primal fear coiling in his chest. He had trained for high-speed maneuvers, for life-or-death combat scenarios, for split-second reactions, but nothing had prepared him for this. This was a predator in the sky, aware of him, anticipating him, calculating him with intelligence that felt almost human. The lead F-16 surged forward, banking sharply, its movements precise to the millisecond. Alex followed instinctively, trying to match every turn, every acceleration, every subtle shift of the aircraft. The other F-16 mirrored them, forming a tight wedge around him, a shield against the impossible threat that seemed to defy all logic. "Phantom, brace yourself," the calm, measured voice instructed over the radio. Alex's stomach lurched. Brace himself. The words were clinical, detached, but the tension in them was undeniable. The shadow was not just pursuing, they were about to engage. He tightened his grip on the controls, forcing every ounce of focus into the moment. The metallic blur surged again, darting beneath the clouds, banking impossibly, and then accelerating straight toward them. Alex felt the cockpit shake from turbulence, though it was no ordinary gust of wind. It was the air displaced by the sheer velocity of the shadow. The radar flickered. The blip of the entity appeared and disappeared in rapid succession, too fast for the sensors to fully capture. Alex's pulse hammered in his temples. This was no drone, no experimental aircraft, no conventional threat. It was something else entirely, something he had no frame of reference for. He stole a glance at the F-16s beside him. Their pilots were faceless behind helmets, yet he sensed a strange, unnerving confidence in their movements. They didn't panic. They didn't hesitate. Their jets moved like extensions of the sky itself, a living barrier between him and the unknown entity. And yet there was urgency in the choreography, a subtle warning he couldn't ignore. The shadow darted again, this time diving sharply from above, slicing through the cloud cover with impossible speed. Alex felt his stomach drop as he banked hard to follow, engines screaming, wings tilting at extreme angles. The G-forces pressed him into his seat, muscles straining, heart racing. "Phantom, it's learning your limits," the voice said, calm yet chilling. Alex's stomach sank. Limits. He felt like he had none left to give. Every muscle, every nerve, every ounce of concentration was stretched to its breaking point. He forced himself to focus, to observe, to survive, even as his mind screamed that he was being outmatched, outclassed, and outmaneuvered by an intelligence that had no name, no origin, no explanation. The shadow banked sharply to the left, a flash of silver against the pale sky. Alex followed, barely catching it in the corner of his vision. His breath came in shallow bursts, sweat running down his temples. He could feel the presence of the entity, an awareness in the air, a pressure in the clouds, a tension that coiled around him like a predator ready to strike. Suddenly it surged upward toward the sun, disappearing behind a veil of clouds. Alex's heart jumped. Where had it gone? The radar flickered. The blip reappeared above him, and in an instant it had closed the distance again, banking impossibly close. The lead F-16 surged in response, cutting through the air with precision, keeping Alex in the protective wedge. But even as he followed, Alex realized the horrifying truth. The shadow wasn't just observing. It was testing them, probing their reactions, anticipating every maneuver, studying every instinct, every decision. The radio crackled again, the calm voice almost intimate now. "Phantom, it's targeting you. Stand ready." Alex's chest tightened, targeting him. The words hit like a hammer. He realized the chase wasn't random. It wasn't a game. He had been singled out. This entity, whatever it was, had chosen him. His stomach lurched as the shadow darted in front of him, cutting across the sun in a flash of blinding brilliance. Alex instinctively pulled back on the throttle, banking hard, forcing the jet into a sharp climb. The F-16s mirrored him perfectly, forming a barrier that should have been impossible, but nothing about this encounter was ordinary. The shadow surged again, banking sharply, diving toward them at impossible speed. Alex felt his stomach drop as turbulence rattled the cockpit violently. The world outside became a blur of clouds, sunlight, and metallic glints, each motion faster than his mind could process. "Phantom, do not break formation. Do not panic," the voice instructed. Alex's fingers trembled as he forced himself to follow, scanning, calculating, surviving. The F-16s kept the wedge tight, moving like extensions of some unseen intelligence, guiding him through the impossible, shielding him from the unknown predator. The shadow swooped down beneath them, appearing from nowhere, then streaked upward, banking toward Alex with surgical precision. His stomach lurched again. The entity's movements were deliberate, almost taunting, as if it knew the exact moment to pressure him, to test his reflexes, to expose his limits. The lead F-16 surged forward, cutting directly between Alex and the entity, engines screaming in a protective gesture. Alex felt the sweat on his palms as the cockpit shook violently. The shadow banked sharply, adjusting midair, slicing through the clouds like a knife through silk. "Phantom, prepare for evasive action," the radio whispered. Alex's heart pounded in his ears. Evasive action. He was already pushing his jet beyond every limit he knew. He tightened his grip, forced his body to respond, and followed the F-16's lead. His vision tunneled slightly from the G-forces, adrenaline screaming through his veins, every second stretching into eternity. The shadow surged once more, banking impossibly close, the air around it shimmering with a strange energy that Alex couldn't name. The radar flickered again, and he realized with a growing horror. The entity was everywhere and nowhere at once. It wasn't just fast, it was aware, intelligent, and it had already calculated him. The radio fell silent for a heartbeat, and Alex's stomach dropped. Then the calm voice returned, quieter, almost intimate. "Phantom, it's coming for you, now." Alex's breath caught in his throat. The shadow surged forward, closing the distance at terrifying speed. The F-16 surged with him, forming a shield, but Alex knew instinctively that this wasn't just a physical challenge. This was a test of nerve, of instinct, of will. One wrong move, one hesitation, one error, and he could be lost. The shadow banked sharply to the left, then the right, diving toward him in a streak of silver brilliance. Alex's stomach lurched as he pulled back on the controls, forcing the jet into a sharp climb. The F-16s mirrored every motion flawlessly, creating a wedge of protection that felt both reassuring and terrifyingly fragile. Alex's mind raced. How could anything move like this? How could anything anticipate him so perfectly, study him so intimately, close the distance with such precision? Fear clawed at the edges of his consciousness, but he forced himself to focus, to breathe, to survive. The shadow surged closer, its metallic surface catching the sunlight in blinding flashes. Alex felt the heat of adrenaline, the strain in his muscles, the tension in the air. He realized with cold certainty, this encounter was far from over. The entity had not just engaged them, it had marked him. And whatever came next, there would be no turning back. Cliffhanger ending for Part 5. The shadow darted directly toward Alex, faster than the eye could follow, a streak of impossible silver brilliance. The lead F-16 roared, surging to protect him, engines screaming, but Alex knew instinctively that this was a moment that would define survival. The radio crackled one last time, calm yet bone-chilling. "Phantom, it has chosen, hold on." Alex's stomach dropped. His eyes widened. The entity was no longer observing, no longer testing. It was coming for him. And the sky, once serene, now felt like a battlefield where only instinct, courage, and sheer will would decide who survived. Alex's heart pounded like a drum in his chest, each beat echoing through the cockpit as if matching the relentless roar of the jet engines. The shadow was closing fast, its metallic silhouette gleaming like a predator in the dying sunlight, banking sharply, sliding through the sky with impossible precision. He could feel it, not just see it, the presence of something aware, intelligent, and merciless. The F-16 surged with him, a protective wedge, engines screaming in perfect unison. Alex felt both reassured and suffocated by their presence. They moved with inhuman precision, anticipating his moves, guiding him through the impossible chase. Yet their calm mirrored over the radio only heightened his anxiety. He could almost sense the unspoken truth. Even they couldn't fully predict the shadow's next move. "Phantom, brace yourself, it's close." The calm, measured voice sent a shiver down his spine. Close. The word was deliberate, chilling, a prelude to what Alex knew was coming. His stomach twisted as he realized there was no room for error. The sky around him felt heavier, the air tense, as if even the clouds themselves were holding their breath. Suddenly, the shadow surged upward with impossible speed, a silver streak that cut across the horizon like lightning. Alex pulled back sharply on the throttle, climbing hard, wings tilting to extreme angles. G-forces slammed into his body, making his vision tunnel, muscles scream, heart pound. He could feel every fiber of his being stretched to its limit, every instinct screaming survival. The lead F-16 surged alongside him, forming a protective barrier, but Alex's eyes widened as he realized something terrifying. The shadow wasn't just fast, it was predicting their maneuvers. Each climb, each dive, each evasive tilt was met with a mirrored adjustment from the metallic predator, slicing through the sky like a living arrow. He swallowed hard. "It knows me. It knows my moves." The shadow banked sharply, disappearing into a dense bank of clouds, only to reappear moments later, descending from above at impossible speed. The sun caught its edges, reflecting light in flashes that made Alex flinch. He forced his eyes back on the horizon, heart hammering. This was no conventional pursuit. This was intelligence, strategy, and intent wrapped in sleek metallic form. "Phantom, it's testing you. Stay sharp." Alex's stomach dropped. Testing him. He had survived countless training simulations, life-or-death drills, but this was beyond calculation. This was unpredictability dressed in precision, danger disguised as intelligence. He forced his hand steady on the controls, muscles taut, eyes scanning every inch of sky, every flicker of metallic glint, every subtle shift in wind or cloud formation. The shadow surged again, banking toward him in a blur of silver brilliance. Alex's pulse shot through the roof. He forced a sharp dive to the left, barely clearing a dense cloud formation. The F-16s mirrored him, engines screaming, forming a protective wedge that cut through turbulence like a knife. He stole a glance at the radar. Another blip appeared and disappeared in milliseconds, impossible to track consistently. It's everywhere, and nowhere. The shadow darted again, approaching from the right at impossible speed, weaving through clouds, slicing through sunlight, banking so sharply Alex felt the jet tilt beyond what should have been possible. He forced himself to countermaneuver, adjusting angle, throttle, and pitch with all the skill he could muster. The tension was unbearable. "Phantom, hold formation. Do not break." The calm voice on the radio was both an anchor and a warning. Alex swallowed hard, muscles quivering. Breaking formation was not an option, but staying meant surrendering to the unknown intelligence hunting them. He had to survive. He had to stay focused. The shadow surged closer, banking impossibly, cutting through the sky like a predator closing in for the strike. Alex could feel the energy in the air, a tangible pressure that made the cockpit feel smaller, tighter, almost alive. Sweat ran down his temples, palms ached from gripping the controls, jaw clenched from tension. Yet he forced himself to maintain focus, to survive, to observe. Suddenly it darted beneath the clouds, disappearing from view, and Alex's stomach dropped. His mind raced. Where is it? Where is it now? The F-16s veered sharply, creating a protective wedge around him as the shadow reappeared above, banking directly toward him. The sun flashed against its metallic surface in a blinding streak. Alex felt a moment of vertigo, stomach in his throat, adrenaline coursing through every vein. "Phantom, it's coming for you," the radio whispered. Alex's breath caught. Coming for him. The realization hit like a hammer. The entity had singled him out. This was no longer observation or test. It was targeting, hunting, closing in with intent. The shadow dove again, and this time Alex felt the air itself change. The clouds seemed to part, turbulence shredded around him, and the roar of the engines became a white noise roar in his ears. He forced control, pulled into a sharp climb, banking hard, yet the shadow matched every move, slicing the sky with unerring precision. His stomach lurched. The realization was undeniable. This wasn't just a chase, it was a confrontation, and he was not ready. The F-16s formed a tighter perimeter, flanking him like silent guardians, engines screaming in unison. Yet even their presence felt fragile, insufficient. Alex felt a deep, gnawing fear. Whatever this was, it had studied them, analyzed them, understood the limits of human reflex and jet capability, and now it was exploiting those limits mercilessly. The shadow surged again, banking closer, metallic edges flashing in the sunlight. Alex's vision tunneled under the strain of adrenaline and G-forces. His heart thundered, mind racing, body screaming for respite that would not come. He realized with a cold certainty, survival depended on instinct, nerve, and timing alone. The radio crackled again, calm but bone-chilling. "Phantom, it will strike. Stand ready." Alex's stomach dropped. Strike. The word was simple, clinical, yet its weight was catastrophic. He felt the presence of the shadow closing, felt the pressure in the air, the tension in the clouds, the impossible speed of its approach. Sweat ran down his temples as he adjusted his flight path, diving, banking, climbing with all the precision he could muster. The F-16s mirrored him flawlessly, forming a shield, but he knew instinctively that it wouldn't be enough if the shadow decided to push beyond prediction. Suddenly, the shadow surged directly toward him, a streak of silver faster than the eye could follow. The cockpit shook violently from turbulence. Alex's breath came in shallow bursts. He forced his body to respond, muscles straining, mind sharp. The shadow banked sharply, slicing past him, then surged again, impossibly close. Alex could see the metallic edges glinting, almost alive, almost sentient. He felt a cold wave of terror wash over him. "Phantom, do not panic. Hold your course," the voice instructed. Alex's stomach lurched. Hold his course. His mind screamed to evade, to flee, to survive, yet instinct, training, and fear forced him to obey. He tightened his grip, forced control over the jet, over his panic, over his heart racing like a drum in his chest. The shadow banked one last time, climbing toward the sun, then disappeared into the clouds with impossible speed. Alex's heart hammered, lungs burning, adrenaline surging. The silence afterward was almost worse than the chase itself. He stole a glance at the F-16s. They were still there, perfect, unwavering, but the tension was palpable. The radio crackled one final time, quiet, deliberate, almost intimate. "Phantom, it will return, and next time you won't have the F-16s." Alex's stomach dropped. The words echoed in his mind, chilling, unrelenting. This was only the beginning. The shadow wasn't done. It had marked him, and the sky, once a battlefield of adrenaline and instinct, now seemed impossibly vast, filled with threats he couldn't see, predict, or fight. He gritted his teeth, forcing control, forcing calm, forcing focus. The chase was over for now, but the war had only begun. Cliffhanger ending for Part 6. Alex's eyes scanned the horizon, searching for any sign of the shadow. The clouds swirled, the sun fractured through the mist, and the radio went silent. And then, in the distance, a flash of silver caught his eye, a shape moving faster than thought, banking with impossible precision, coming back for him. Alex's stomach lurched. It's not done. The flash of silver shimmered in the distance, slicing across the clouds like a living streak of lightning. Alex's heart slammed against his ribs, every nerve screaming. He gritted his teeth, forcing control over his trembling hands as adrenaline coursed through him, raw and unrelenting. The F-16s flanked him tightly, engines screaming, but Alex knew instinctively. Their protection could only delay the inevitable. The shadow wasn't just returning, it was hunting. Alex banked sharply, following the lead F-16 as it guided him through a swirling bank of storm clouds. Rain pelted the canopy, the turbulence slamming him against his seat, threatening to throw him from control. He could barely see the horizon. Lightning forked across the sky, illuminating the metallic predator above in brief, terrifying bursts. "Phantom, stay with us. Brace yourself," the radio intoned. His stomach lurched. "Brace himself." The words were calm but carried the weight of impending catastrophe. Alex felt his chest tighten. He had no choice, no options left except to trust his instincts, the F-16s, and his ability to survive the impossible. The shadow descended like a silver missile, banking sharply, moving faster than the eye could follow. Alex pulled back on the throttle, forcing the jet into a steep climb. G-forces slammed into him, vision narrowing, muscles screaming in protest. His breath came in short, harsh bursts. He felt the sweat on his palms, the tremor in his hands, the cold certainty that his survival hung by a razor-thin thread. Suddenly, the shadow veered, cutting the sky with impossible precision, and Alex's stomach dropped. It was testing him again, pushing him, gauging his reflexes, his limits, his fear. The entity was smarter than any adversary he had faced, smarter than any simulation, any drill, any human enemy. It was alive, aware, calculating. "Phantom, it's playing with you. Stay sharp," the radio whispered. Alex's pulse thundered. Playing. The thought sent a shiver down his spine. There was no mercy in this encounter. Every movement, every maneuver, every heartbeat was being measured, and the predator in the sky had already learned far more about him than he could imagine. The storm thickened, lightning jagged across the clouds, illuminating the shadow in blinding flashes. Alex's eyes widened. It wasn't just fast. It moved with a fluid grace that defied logic, banking, twisting, diving in patterns that should have been impossible. His stomach lurched as the realization hit. This wasn't just an aerial chase. This was a test of nerve, precision, and survival instinct, and he was running out of margin for error. The lead F-16 surged, engines screaming, cutting through the storm like a knife. Alex followed, heart hammering, stomach churning as the protective wedge enveloped him. Yet, even as he relied on their precision, a part of him knew the truth. He couldn't outrun this entity forever. The shadow was learning, adapting, anticipating. One mistake, one miscalculation, and he would pay the price. Lightning struck close, the air shivering with electricity. The shadow banked sharply, diving toward him in a streak of silver brilliance that left Alex breathless. He forced his jet into a tight climb, pulling with every ounce of strength, every shred of focus he could summon. G-forces pressed him into the seat like a vice, vision blurring at the edges. "Phantom, don't fight it, flow with it," the radio advised. Flow with it. Alex swallowed hard. How could he flow with something that defied the laws of physics, intelligence, and reality itself? He gritted his teeth, forcing control, forcing calm, forcing his body to respond with instinct rather than thought. The shadow surged again, banking directly toward him. Alex's stomach lurched violently. The metallic edges gleamed in flashes of lightning, moving impossibly fast. He felt an icy terror coil in his chest, the primal fear of a hunted animal, a sense of imminent confrontation that made every nerve scream. The F-16s tightened around him, forming a protective wedge, but even their engines screaming in unison could not mask the inevitability. Alex realized with a sinking horror. This was no longer about evasion. The entity was closing, and there would be no more margin for error. A sudden jolt hit the jet as the shadow swooped beneath them, disappearing for a heartbeat before bursting upward in a streak of impossible speed. Alex's stomach dropped. He yanked the controls, twisting, climbing, diving, the aircraft trembling under the strain. His chest burned, muscles screamed, and his mind raced for solutions. But there were none. Only survival, only instinct, only the raw, unrelenting terror of the unknown. Lightning flashed again, illuminating the shadow directly ahead, impossibly close. Alex's breath caught in his throat. The metallic predator banked, diving, climbing, cutting a path through the storm that was almost beautiful in its lethal grace. "Phantom, prepare for engagement," the voice whispered. Engagement. The word hit like a hammer. Alex felt a cold wave of panic, stomach lurching violently. This was no longer a chase, it was confrontation. The entity had chosen him, focused on him, closing the distance with intent and precision that made instinct feel insufficient. He tightened his grip, forcing every ounce of skill, every shred of focus, every beat of his heart into control. The F-16s flanked him perfectly, creating a protective wedge that shimmered in the storm, engines screaming like guardians of a fragile human life. The shadow banked sharply, descending directly toward them, metallic edges gleaming in the lightning. Alex felt the air around him change, tension coiling like a spring ready to snap. G-forces slammed him against the seat as he pulled back, climbing, banking, twisting through the storm with every ounce of strength he could muster. The shadow surged again, impossibly fast, banking in patterns that made his stomach drop. Sweat ran down his temples, hands shook, vision blurred, but he forced himself to focus, to survive, to anticipate. He realized with a growing terror, this entity was not just fast. It was alive, aware, calculating. It had learned him, studied him, and now it was pushing him to his absolute limits. Lightning illuminated the sky, the clouds twisting around them in a furious storm. Alex's chest burned with the effort of flying beyond human limits. He felt raw fear, adrenaline, and determination coiling together into a single driving force: survival. He had to survive. He had to survive. The shadow surged directly toward him, faster than thought, faster than fear. Alex forced a sharp bank, pulling the jet into an impossible angle, heart hammering, stomach lurching, mind screaming. The F-16s mirrored him flawlessly, forming a protective wedge, but he knew instinctively it might not be enough. "Phantom, it will strike." Now, the radio whispered, calm but bone-chilling. Alex's stomach dropped. Strike. The word resonated in his chest like a warning, a prophecy of imminent collision. He gritted his teeth, forced control, and prepared for the inevitable confrontation. The shadow surged closer, metallic edges gleaming, slicing through the storm. Alex felt every muscle scream, every nerve coil, every heartbeat thunder. And then, in the next instant, the impossible happened. The entity banked sharply above him, then plummeted in a controlled dive, streaking past him like a silver bullet. His stomach lurched violently. The world outside blurred, clouds, lightning, jets, metallic blur, all merging into a chaotic ballet of speed, terror, and survival. Alex felt the raw edge of fear, the edge of human limitation, and the edge of control itself. The radio crackled, almost intimate, almost soft. "Phantom, survive this and you'll see the truth." Alex's jaw tightened. Truth. The word left him with more questions than answers, more terror than relief. The shadow vanished into the clouds, leaving only silence, tension, and the storm around them. He stole a glance at the F-16s. Their presence was unwavering, flawless, but the tension in the formation mirrored his own. They had guided him, shielded him, pushed him to survive, but even they seemed to sense that the encounter was far from over. Alex swallowed hard, chest heaving, vision clearing, mind racing. The shadow had retreated for now, but he knew with an icy certainty it was not finished. It would return, and when it did, he would face it without the protective wedge, without guidance, without margin for error. Cliffhanger ending for Part 7. Storm clouds swirled around him, flashes of lightning illuminating a sky that was no longer safe. And then a distant shimmer, silver, fast, deliberate, caught his eye. The shadow was coming back. And this time Alex knew instinctively the rules of survival would change forever. Alex's hands were trembling, gripping the controls with a desperation that burned through every fiber of his body. The storm had not eased, the clouds twisting violently around him, lightning slicing the sky in blinding bursts. And then through the fractured gray sky, a flash of silver streaked into view. The shadow. This time it was different. It didn't dart, it didn't test. It descended deliberately, purposefully, like a predator circling its prey. Alex felt the weight of inevitability pressing down on him, a primal fear he couldn't shake. "Phantom, this is it." The radio crackled, calm but chilling, the voice almost intimate. "You face it now." Alex's stomach lurched. Now, the word echoed like a verdict. The F-16s flanked him, engines screaming, forming the protective wedge that had saved him again and again, but even their precision now felt fragile, temporary. He knew instinctively this was his fight. Alone. The shadow surged closer, metallic edges glinting with a malevolent intelligence. Alex forced the jet into a tight climb, pulling with every ounce of strength, feeling the G-forces press him into the seat until it hurt to breathe. Lightning flashed, illuminating the entity in a ghostly silver brilliance. It was bigger than he thought, faster than he imagined, more alive than any machine should be. His pulse thundered. Fear clawed at his chest, but beneath it was something stronger, determination. He had survived impossible maneuvers, impossible speeds, impossible testing. He would not be broken here, not now. The shadow banked sharply, closing in from the right, then streaked above him with blinding speed. Alex yanked the controls, twisting, banking, diving in a frantic dance. The storm screamed around him, engines roaring, clouds twisting like molten silver. Every instinct screamed, survive. "Phantom, engage," the radio whispered almost reverently. Alex's stomach dropped. Engage. The word was final. His eyes narrowed, hands gripping the controls like lifelines. He forced himself to focus, to anticipate, to flow with the impossible movements of the entity in front of him. The shadow dove, banking directly toward him in a streak of silver lightning. Alex pulled back, climbing hard, twisting, countering every impossible movement. The F-16s mirrored him flawlessly, forming the shield, but he knew they couldn't block it forever. He had to act. He stole a glance at the radar. Another blip appeared and disappeared in milliseconds, faster than the sensors could track. The entity was everywhere and nowhere at once. His stomach lurched violently. How could something move like this? How could something anticipate him so perfectly? And then it struck. Not physically yet, but mentally, emotionally, viscerally. The shadow banked sharply, diving so close that Alex felt the air itself distort, the turbulence screaming in his ears. It was a presence, a force, alive with intelligence and intent, and it was testing him in ways he hadn't imagined possible. His heart raced, mind scrambled, and muscles screamed with exertion. "Phantom, push past fear. See it for what it is," the voice on the radio whispered. See it, the words hit like a revelation. Alex's chest tightened. For months he had feared the unknown, the impossible, the entity that defied all explanation. But now he understood. Survival was not just about reflex. It was about understanding, facing it, not running. He forced himself to breathe, to center, to focus beyond instinct. The shadow banked again, impossibly close, and Alex did something he didn't expect. He held his line. He stopped reacting with panic, stopped evading blindly. He matched the entity's movements with deliberate precision, studying it, anticipating its intentions. For a heartbeat the world froze, the storm, the roar of engines, the flashing lightning, all paused as if the sky itself waited. Alex felt an icy realization. The shadow was intelligent, yes, but it could be understood, engaged, even challenged. It surged again, banking sharply, and Alex met it. Wingtip to wingtip, their movements mirrored in a deadly ballet. The F-16s formed the shield, but Alex no longer relied solely on them. He had become part of the sky, part of the storm, part of the impossible rhythm of predator and prey. Lightning split the clouds, illuminating the metallic brilliance, and Alex felt a rush of exhilaration mixed with terror. He had never flown like this before. He had never faced anything like this. And yet, for the first time, he felt in control. The shadow dove, then twisted, banking upward in a maneuver so precise it seemed impossible. Alex mirrored perfectly, pushing his jet beyond every limit he had known. G-forces pressed him into the seat, vision tunneling, breath ragged, but he held. The radio crackled, quiet, reverent. "Phantom, you are ready." The words resonated through him. Ready. Alex's stomach tightened. He knew what it meant. This was no longer a chase. This was the culmination, the confrontation that would define him. The shadow surged again, and Alex responded not with fear, not with panic, but with deliberate, controlled precision. He anticipated its every twist, every dive, every impossible maneuver. For the first time, he was not running. He was dancing with the predator. And then, as suddenly as it had begun, the entity pulled back. The air seemed to hum with tension, the storm around them crackling, lightning illuminating a scene both terrifying and beautiful. Alex's eyes widened. The shadow banked, paused, and in a fluid, impossible motion, it ascended into the clouds, vanishing from sight. Silence followed, a heavy, electric silence. The storm still raged, lightning flashing, engines screaming, but the entity was gone. The F-16s flanked him, wings glinting in the storm, and Alex felt a shiver of disbelief, adrenaline still coursing through every vein. "Phantom, you faced it," the radio whispered, calm, almost reverent, "and it acknowledged you." Alex's stomach lurched. Acknowledged. His chest heaved. He felt raw, primal relief mixed with disbelief and lingering fear. He had faced the impossible, the unknown, the entity that defied logic, and he had survived. Not just survived, but matched it, engaged it, proven he could stand in its presence. The storm slowly began to break, the clouds parting to reveal pale sunlight cutting through. Alex's jet trembled from exertion, but his hands remained steady, grip firm, eyes scanning the horizon. The F-16s adjusted formation, engines easing slightly. He swallowed hard, chest heaving, mind racing. The shadow was gone for now, but he knew instinctively it would return, and when it did, he would be ready, not just to survive, but to confront, to endure, to overcome. For the first time since the chase began, Alex allowed himself a breath of relief. And yet in the back of his mind, a quiet, unshakable truth remained. The sky had changed forever. The rules of survival, the limits of human skill, the boundaries of fear, they had all been rewritten, and he had been tested at the very edge. The radio crackled one last time. "Phantom, you are no longer the hunted. You are the storm." Alex's stomach tightened, a shiver running down his spine. The words echoed, resonating deep within him. The shadow had marked him, tested him, challenged him, and he had endured. He had faced the unknown and survived. The sky stretched endlessly before him, clouds parting, sunlight glinting on metal, engines roaring in triumph. Alex felt a surge of something powerful, primal, unstoppable. Survival, mastery, and the unshakable certainty that he had crossed a line few ever dared to approach, and lived. As he guided his jet through the thinning storm, one thought burned in his mind. The shadow would return, and next time the encounter would be different, but Alex would be ready. Because he was no longer the hunted, he was the storm.